Warrant Article 13. Hang in there, folks. We got two more. Warrant Article 13, by petition, to see if the town will vote to reverse the appointed office of part-time fire chief to an elected position. The current fire chief shall continue to hold the office until the 2020 annual town meeting election, at which time the town will elect a part-time fire chief. If adopted, the authority of the town to elect the fire chief shall continue in effect until changed by a majority vote at an annual or special meeting. This is not recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0-0. And I'm recognizing to speak to this article, Mr. Tim Hebert.
Oh, no, Tim's not going to be here, so I'm going to have to take it.
Okay. I will now recognize Mr. Cabral to speak to the article.
Okay. The purpose for the article: to hire a fire chief within our town that understands and shares our tax burden, who does not require the yearly salary the current Board of Selectmen approves. This will also help ensure fair and equal opportunities, help to build better communication between the fire chief and our community, help to keep the taxpayers informed of spending, and allow for the taxpayers to work with our governing body and fire chief to bring the way our fire department operates in line with other communities of our population, not the larger ones they always are using like Nashua, Bedford, Hudson, and Manchester. Okay, our reason for this petition: several taxpayers feel that spending for the management of this department is getting out of hand. Having the highest paid part-time fire chief along with bonuses, merit increases are not okay with some taxpayers. Taxpayers want transparency with this department and, more importantly, spending. We live in a community of 8,400 people, taxpayers, and they don't want to be compared to Milford, Bedford, Nashua, or Manchester. Comparison is not necessary. Taxpayers know what they want and what they need. It shouldn't take the Board of Selectmen having costly MRI studies to figure that out. Open concept meetings with our board, and fire chief is what is suggested. What I'd like to see happen is for us to have a committee with one budget, one selectman, 4 residents, go through the same thing I mentioned already. No sense in going through that whole thing. So.
Okay, I now recognize Selectman John Brunel to speak to this warrant article.
I think, just as the last article, there's similar concerns, right? So elected position, again, can be someone could be elected that's based on a popularity contest, not skilled, not qualified to be a fire chief. The elected fire chief could place Litchfield's firefighters in an awkward position where the good old boy network, to your point earlier about the friends of the friends kind of thing. An appointed fire chief is subject to the town policies and personnel policies. Elected position, I said earlier, is not. Appointed chiefs must meet minimum job standards and qualifications. An elected official cannot. We can't enforce qualifications. Even if you did a committee, you can't enforce it. Someone can sign up for election and get elected. An appointed chief is subject to review for criminal history, driver records, financial records, professional background. Elected positions are not. Again, goes back to getting a qualified person. Candidates for a chief can be subject to review, input by department heads, staff, residents, peer panels. Elected officials aren't. As I talked about earlier, when we hired our existing fire chief, we went through that process. It was a multi-month process where we went through oral boards, experts helping us identify what the qualifications required, and then the board finally made a decision to hire the current chief today. You mentioned in his statement, he mentioned cost. The fire chief is paid $45 an hour, compared to our plow truck drivers are paid $45 an hour. I just said it to give a little bit of reference. Selectmen can same thing. Selectmen can negotiate wages, benefits, and the contract period for a fire chief. Again, as I said in one of the previous article, it's the board's position that sets us backwards. We need to make sure that we always have the right person in the job. We can't go, elected year of 3 years of a candidate who can't run a department and can't operate this critical department for the town.
Are there any questions or amendments to this proposed article? Mr. Spencer.
Bill Spencer, 9 Cranberry Lane. Without thinking about whether it's good or bad to have appointed or elected. I'll speak to the petition, which says, what do we want to do? Do we want to change or not? I think this particular article is just as clear as the previous one we voted on, and I would hope that it does not get amended such it is not as clear to the voters as it is as presently stated.
Are there further questions or amendments that are requested for this petitioned warrant article? Sir?
Comments? I have a couple specific ones. Excuse me.
Good catch.
And this probably, my first comment probably goes to the town council representative. There's various kinds of background checks. Positions of public trust is one that would come up to mind that probably the Board of Selectmen would be subject to. Maybe not, I could be wrong. But that, you know, there's background checks that you could do on anyone. So a background check on people, there's all kinds. And it doesn't seem unreasonable
What's your question, sir?
that you could do it on an elected official, right?
No, you cannot.
You cannot do a background check on an elected official.
That surprises me, but I'll accept that answer. Thank you. My next question is for qualification requirements or qualification criteria to hold an elected position. I don't mean to start any political controversy here, but there are qualifications to run for the President of the United States. He has to be a natural-born U.S. citizen. He has to be above a certain age. So there are statutory criteria that must be met to hold elected positions. There's precedent for it.
There
I
are
don't know if
no
New Hampshire
statutory
follows that.
criteria to hold the position of elected fire chief.
I'm sorry, what, sir?
There are no statutory required criteria to hold the position of elected fire chief.
Okay. Is there provision that we could define
No,
criteria, qualification criteria?
no. If it's an elected position, anyone can run.
Okay. Thank you. And then for the actual qualifications part of it, again, my professional experiences with, I've done firefighting, but I'm not a firefighter. I've done fire protection engineering, but I'm not a fire protection engineer. Is the position of fire chief, is he an administrator, or is he a scene commander, or is he both?
Both.
He's both.
Okay. If he's both, then he has to have qualifications without question to me. If we're talking and if we're talking about making him, for example, a department head administrator who, with some responsibilities to ensure things happen, that he delegates to people who know how to do those things, then I don't care about his qualifications as much, right?
Do you have a question? Or
My question was answered, but I followed it up with my comment of how I view his position. I personally suggest maybe you consider that the department head be an administrator with a operational responsibility of somebody below him that is required to be the qualified person. That's my opinion. Thank you.
further comments or amendments? Ma'am?
Nicole, 4085 page. I think with part of this, it's also what we need to see is, you know, why isn't there a petition about the police chief or other, you know, similar positions? If we're going to just keep going, you know, if the idea is that that the voters want more say in what's going on, then we need to come out, either go to meetings. There are many opportunities to get involved in Litchfield and have your opinion heard. You can email the chairs of the Board of Selectmen, the Budget Committee, the school board. You know, if there's ways that people want to get involved, I think that's great, and I fully support that. I just don't think electing these positions is the best way for what's going to go forward. And just to think about, you know, maybe why it's only these couple positions and why not other positions. If it's really about, no, the voters want more say and we want to be able to elect them, well then wouldn't we be asking for much more than this? So just look into it and think about it And if you would really like to get more involved, there are many ways to do that in this town.
Okay, thank you. Are there further comments or amendments on this warrant article? Sir?
Jeff Knoll, 28 Wren Street. The petitioner and the author of the petition wrote it himself that he would like to see a committee put together to look into the credentials of the proposed elected fire chief. There's nothing that we can do to create that before a person's put on the ballot to become a fire chief. If we elect a fire chief, anybody in town who says, I want to be on the fire department, be the fire chief, can put his name on the ballot and win. He's putting the lives of every resident in jeopardy by doing that, not knowing what he's doing as a fire chief, not to mention all the men and women on the fire department who put their lives on the line every day for this town. I'd just like to say, for the people who want to vote for this change, keep that in mind, that you're jeopardizing everybody's life.
Further comments or amendments?
Sure, good morning. Ed Glancy, Lund Street. I just wanted to follow up. Jeff actually stole some of my thunder, but at the end of the day, I've been on the fire department for 14 years and a resident of the town since '99. Here to tell you that I've lived through the elected fire chief position as well as appointed. Appointed for us has brought us, from a qualifications perspective, much further than we've been, because the Board of Selectmen have spent the time to interview qualified candidates for the position. At the end of the day, to further just facilitate what Jeff had said, there are safety concerns for all of you, as well as us on scene. And it's not an administrative position. There are plenty of times when our fire chief shows up and will help with the command of a less than optimal situation. So qualifications for fire chief is very important for this town. So I would ask that we do not support Article 13 and we stay with an appointed fire chief. Thank you.
Further comments? Amendments?
Hi, Jason Hubbard, 29 Woodhawk Way. I just wanted to, one, reiterate what the last two people said. I've been on the fire department for 8 years, and going backwards to an elected fire chief is absolutely the wrong move. Appointed chief has brought so many more qualifications and so much more training to the department. And in addition, to the commenters saying that they wanted to have a say in these key positions, we do get a say. We get a say in that we elect the Board of Selectmen to represent us. They then go and do the interviews. They interview the most qualified candidates. The town itself can't conduct an interview process. It's a popularity contest, and people who understand politics and know how to run a campaign are the ones that are going to win, not the most qualified candidates. These petition articles do not have the best interests of the town in mind. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Doug Nickel, 44 Robin Ave. I'm also your full-time deputy fire chief. I've served the community for over 32 years. I've been full-time now for 29 years. I've started out as a firefighter. I was a lieutenant for 7 years. I was a captain for 17 years, and I have been your deputy fire chief for 4 years. That's all a progression to get us in a leadership role and to build the department so that when the fire chief leaves or somebody behind, that we have that leadership behind there to come up to the next level. When you elect a fire chief, you have nobody with qualifications. We have had an elected fire chief in the past that had an entry-level fire certification and wasn't even an emergency medical technician, which we all are now, leading your department. It's a very unsafe thing to do. In the last 7 years, we have an appointed fire chief that has the highest qualifications, some of them in the nation, and you're paying that extra money, the $45 an hour you're paying somebody that's never driven a plow truck to facilitate and be the CEO of the fire department and oversee 32 guys that are putting their lives on the line for you. And to me, to want to go back to an elected position is foolish. Thank you.
Brian Kimball, 10 Garden Drive, Litchfield. I fully support the appointed fire chief. I put my life on the line every time the tone goes off. I've been sworn to protect you guys. I can't support it because I want somebody that's gonna be behind me, you know, with the highest qualifications possible. Thank you.
.240 Charles Bancroft Highway, Derek Earl. I've been on the department on and off since '98, so I have also seen both sides of this. And when we have an elected position, it's very inconsistent. They come, they go, but we're still here, and we still need to protect you. And our safety, along with your safety, should be your #1 priority. With them appointed, they're vetted, and they can follow through with what they initially said they were going to do.
Ray Thomas, 323 Charles Bancroft.
Could you, I'm sorry, if you could repeat your name again, please. sir.
Ernest Thomas.
Thank you.
I am a certified firefighter. I have career level firefighter. I've taken other classes, and if you change this position, you would have an unqualified person in the role of chief. Most of them don't have EMS, incident command system stuff. The ones that do are the highest qualified people.
John Travis, 2 Center Street. I've been on the department for 20 years. I'm your part-time deputy fire chief. Hello, everybody. Like I support, as you can see, everybody supports this, and Warren's been on the longest, but like Doug, I've been through 4 chiefs since I've been here. And this one, by far, we are safer, you are safer. We are better trained, so you are safer. And I do not support an elected position. It just doesn't work. Like Firefighter Earl said and Lieutenant Earl said, they're not here anymore, but we all are. So please don't support this.
Warren Adams, 507 Charles Bancroft Highway. Been on this department for over 50 years. And I've seen elected fire chiefs, and I've seen some good ones and some that I would be afraid to have my house burning or be in the house and worry about somebody coming and get me. The chief you have now has been well vetted, and he comes with the highest qualifications that any chief could come with. I've experienced over the radio, in other words, on the fire department, listening to viewing the fires, and you hear screaming and yelling. I mean, it's almost like deer in the headlights when they see a big blaze in front of them, and they start screaming. They go out of sight. Either that or have another chief from another department, another town come and run their fire. And that's the very wrong thing to do. And I have listened, like with this chief, very, very calm through the whole process, placed all the trucks and all the equipment and all the people in the right position, which was the Wilson fire, which was a potential for a disaster. And I was very impressed with him, with it, and I'm still very impressed with him. My question is, why do you want to go back to the 80s and jeopardize? You're going to ruin the fire department as you know it right now. The members, you get the wrong person in there, they're all going to leave. And they're dedicated firemen. It takes hours upon hours upon hours of training to even be level 1, and a lot of them are the higher levels. EMTs, it's a lot of time that they put their own time into in order to get trained to help the town of Litchfield. I joined with the idea that I wanted to help the town of Litchfield, and I think I have. And my question is, I guess, why do you want to go back and to chaos, you know, everything chaotic in the town? And I've seen it both ways, and believe me, you don't want to go back.
Thank you. Are there any further discussions or amendments to this article?
Mr. Moderator, if you might indulge me. My name is Frank Freutzler. I am your fire chief and have been for 7 years. And I'd like to, if I can, just speak to a couple of the comments that were raised by the petitioner. Tax burden. No, I am not a taxpayer in this community, but I am a taxpayer and have been for over 30 years in other communities. I understand it. My salary is what it is. You've heard the comparison to the plow drivers. I hold a lot of certification. I've been a fire chief for well over a decade. That's what I bring to this community and to this department. Communication. I find very interesting because the little communication I have coming in, phone calls, visitors, emails, I've always addressed in a very timely manner. The petitioner has never once come to see me, called me, or emailed me regarding any concerns. Spending. In the 7 years I've been your fire chief, I've never once exceeded my budget. In fact, turned back well over $10,000 in most years of the budget. So I'm not sure where the excessive spending comes from. Operationally, I can't speak to that because there's no, we meet industry best practices, NFPA standards, state requirements. As far as comparing us to other communities, I can't speak to that without more detail. Transparency, I'm as open a book as they come. My door's always open. Again, if you've got questions, you've got concerns, come see me. If you don't like what I'm doing, you've got the opportunity to go to the board. They can terminate me. But as an elected fire chief, they have no control. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Are there any other comments or amendments to this warrant article?
Thank you. Jason Brennan, 23 Aldridge Street. I just wanted to publicly thank the fire department for their dedication to this town, and I stand behind you after listening to this today. Thank you very much.
Are there any other comments, questions, or any offered amendments to this warrant article? Hearing none then, the warrant article as written will appear on the ballot.